All right, are universities free to say what they want? Are universities a source of exploration of free speech? Greg Lukianoff says that some may not be, and censorship is still prevalent in many universities where they should not be there. My name is Dean Dominguez. I'm a graduate student in philosophy at San Jose State University, and I'm replying to his video on free speech. So, Greg made two important claims here that I will first exposit and then use the First Amendment and a president of the First Amendment to critique Greg's response. I will go on to talk about John Stuart Mill's three regions of human liberty, along with his harm principle. Then I can conclude with how we should treat censorship in universities, with two major factors being how do we define harm, how can free speech harm people, and how does free speech offend people. And if free speech can harm people, then censorship may be permissible in a university setting. But if people are being offended by free speech, then I think censorship is not permissible, or it's impermissible. So the First Amendment says the following: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to place peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So we cannot prohibit free exercise of free speech. People can assemble, and people can petition the government if they don't like what the government is doing. So that's then we have president, which of course there was that one court case that states that if someone yells fire in a crowded theater, that is an improper use of free speech, namely because the exercise of the free speech did cause harm in theater. So if people get excited in a theater, it's very crowded, people will step over each other, people will get injured. I can imagine people stepping on other people's hands and heads as they crawl down towards the bottom level of the theater. People will be pushing through the exit doors, and if someone falls down, then they're going to be hurt. So that exercise of free speech was rather futile. It was protected under the First Amendment, but now the Supreme Court, or the courts, have ruled that that kind of free speech is not permissible. So let's just apply that to universities. So if there's free speech out there that does constitute harm, then perhaps the university does have grounds to censor it. Now, how do we define harm? How do we define offense? Well, we'll have to use the university will have to define them, and maybe even the students should define them. We should have some kind of democratic libertarianism going on in the school where everyone's vote counts and people reach a consensus of the laws. Of course, this is not a clean-cut deal because a lot of universities are pushed forward by endowments, by their donators, and the donators have certain expectations of how the university should be run. So let's go to Mill and his three regions of human liberty. Means that if we have these three things, the society is free. Let us just apply these things to whether or not a university is free. If a university can have or hold opinions, follow their tastes and pursuits, and they have the freedom to assemble, so a little similar to the First Amendment, then we have a free university. Now, the harm principle will go on all these three things and say that we can do all these three things as long as we do not harm people. So if we can prove that a given university has all those three things and is not harming people in the process, then I think that's when we should say, okay, it's time to ban censorship. But if we find grounds that people are being harmed, then we can say, okay, people need to be censored because there's harm involved. Just in the case of the yelling fire in a crowded theater. So that's all I wanted to say. And that's thank you for listening. Obviously, we need to pay attention to the discourse involved in universities because that is a place to explore ideas. And of course, if people have bad ideas, we will identify those arguments as bad and then create good arguments from that. If people have good ideas and good arguments, then we can build on that and create even better arguments. So I think that's the kind of discourse we need. Of course, it's permissible for people to be offended, but not permissible for people to be harmed. How do we define harm? Well, that's where we, the people, must come in and define it. Thank you.